Hello, everyone. This is Alexander Horat. And before we begin, if you could please subscribe to the channel and leave a like on the video, that would be great. And today we're having a very special guest on the show, and that's Monty Fritts. He's a state assemblyman in Tennessee for the District 32, and he's running for governor. Hello, Monty. Thank you for coming on the show.
Hey, brother, how are you today? I appreciate your time.
Oh, I'm doing really great, and I really appreciate your time coming on to provide all your insight on issues. So, for people who don't know you, could you tell the audience a little bit about yourself and your background?
Absolutely. I'm from Kingston, Tennessee. Spent most of my life here in Rome County. Um, Married to my wife Denise for almost 42 years now. We have two grown sons, three grandchildren. I'm a born again Christian. We attend church and members at First Baptist Church in Rockwood, Tennessee, where I was saved and baptized when I was a little boy, some 54 years ago. And we I'm a veteran. I joined the Army soon after high school. I spent 10 years with the Guard, Tennessee Guard. Reenlisted in 2003 in the middle of a work career. I had a great employer at that time. Went on active duty for about 18 months. Spent some time in Iraq as a cavalry scout. Um, Spent most of my career in nuclear manufacturing, uranium synthesis, and production. I was an enriched uranium operations director manager at Y12 plant for a number of years. Did some foreign non-proliferation work over that period of time in 2007, 2008. I spent a couple of years as a weapons program production liaison with headquarters toward the end of my Y12 career. Spent an offer to go up and be the director of ops at Nuclear Fuels in Irwin. Did that for about a year. Got another offer to go back when Trump 45 was in. I was offered a non-competitive appointment to manage material recovery and recycle for the strategic deterrent. I did that, set up the Office of Stockpile Production Integration. Somewhere along the way there, went back to school. College was never a thing for me in high school, so I went back to school a little bit later. Finished bachelor's degree at Liberty, master's in theological studies from Liberty University, an MBA from the University of Tennessee, and I had a certificate in operations excellence from MIT that I took as part of my nuclear fuels work, a correspondence type thing. But so I think of myself as a lifelong learner. I think that's important. I often encourage young people to become a subject matter expert in something new every day. And while that's an impossibility, it is a good goal for continuous improvement. I try to live that way and try to encourage folks to live that way.
Yeah, I think that's definitely great. I think it's always smart, basically, to keep learning as you grow older and not get like stuck in the mud and like not learning anything new. So I think that's great that you're a lifelong learner. And it definitely sounds like you had a lot of difficult work with the nuclear industry. That sounds pretty interesting.
Yeah,
Uh,
blessed to get to do it. I think the good Lord has a sense of humor that He would put country boy me in doing some of those things, but it was awesome to get to do those, and thankful for it.
Yeah, that's really cool. So let's get on to your state assembly, what you've done in the assembly. So what have been some of your most big bills that you've sponsored and your most important bills that you feel you did in the state assembly?
I think as a state representative in the General Assembly, I think by far, I'm thankful first that the good Lord would let me carry some of the legislation we've carried. I think he's looking for bold men to stand up and do things. I think we have too many passive, weak men in politics, and so I've tried hard not to be one of those. Um, in no really timeline chronology, but I think probably the most significant thing that I'm most happy to have been a part of is we called the state into a month of fasting and prayer in July of 2024. Uh, we House Joint Resolution 803 becomes something I think we haven't had a state do in the United States in our history. We tried to pattern what Adams and Washington and other great founding leaders had done in recognizing that we had problems that we couldn't legislate ourselves out of, that we couldn't spend ourselves out of. We were just making more expensive problems in many cases. And our founders were firm believers that our rights and our blessings come from Almighty God. And our Tennessee Constitution documents Almighty God, Article 1, Section 3. Our founders were not the polytheists that many politicians are today. I think, just to be honest, brother, many of these men of faith and women of faith are really aligning themselves with a polytheistic worldview, where we bring many gods into the temple, if you will, and we shouldn't do that. There's one God, and His Son's name is Jesus, and we need to stick to that. Our founders did. So, anyways, we 30 days of fasting prayer. Got a chance to visit all 95 courthouses in Tennessee, and we got a chance to pray with folks across the state in what I refer to as the 32 days of July of 2024. We actually started at the last of June, so that's why I go with the 32 days. Then we got to replicate that in 2025. So now every July in Tennessee is a month of prayer and fasting. And again, if you haven't read that, you can. We set up a website. Somebody had the really good idea, and so there's a website with no tax dollars in it. A couple of individuals from Middle Tennessee manage that now. Terry and Barbie Franklin, great Christian couple. But you can go to pray4tn.us, pray4tn.us, and see a copy of both the resolutions and kind of the history of that. It's a beautiful thing to be a part of. Along those same lines, we did some things in energy. I think that were quite unique. We set up an energy policy in my first year in the General Assembly with a macro goal of Tennessee being a net kilowatt exporter. Not the goal of just selling electricity to everybody, but kilowatts are in the economy of things, much like F-250s or loaves of bread. If there's a greater demand than there is a supply, it costs that product to go more expensive. And we're doing that with kilowatts now. So we're trying to move Tennessee away from that and have a seat at the energy policy table. Senior executives in TVA have failed us for decades and shutting down production capacity and capabilities prematurely. And so we're trying to have a seat at that. We restructured the Energy Policy Council in the next year to put non-paid subject matter experts, people who are volunteering their time to contribute in all of the energy sectors across Tennessee, from crude oil processing in Memphis to uranium and supply chain and nuclear criticality safety here in East Tennessee, and all points in between, natural gas on the Highland Rim. And so we've got a good team of people together now. We're trying to get that restructured within state government to report to the right people. Some of the bureaucrats in Nashville, everything's a money game to them. So we struggled some last year. The Department of Environment and Conservation and Economic and Community Development wanted to put a big price tag on having the reports just come to their office. And typical bureaucratic fashion, they behave more like DC and Nashville than they behave like Tennesseans sometimes. So we're still struggling with that, but we're making good directions in energy policy in Tennessee. While many of these federal politicians have spent decades in DC and had oversight of our Tennessee Valley Authority, they've been inept in their oversight. And so we're trying to take that on from a state level. We got the opportunity to prohibit geoengineering in Tennessee. House Bill 2063 a couple of years ago, we led the nation in that. And I think Tennessee should lead the nation in all things. We try to do that. We prohibited geoengineering. We took the geoengineering, rather than, lots of people refer to it as like chemtrails and all that. There's cloud seeding and there's the carbon capture and solar radiation management and all those things. So we tried to use terminology that captured everything. Unfortunately, our governor doesn't want to enforce some of the law and doesn't want to take an attempt at it. So we got it passed. We did lead the nation in that. Other states have tried to follow us. Florida successfully. They brought in some really good legislation last year. I think that's important. It's important for our families and our farmers, for clean soil, air and water, our food supplies, the deposit of chemicals into the atmosphere to try to manipulate the weather is an unacceptable thing. In my view, it's immoral and unconstitutional. But we've led the way with that, and we'll continue to try to do some of those things as governor. We'll enforce the law and push harder on those entities that would monetize precipitation, which is happening in the western states. We have companies that are cloud seeding to harvest more rain in states, and that's a precarious position for me, because I think at some point in time you might find a part of our nation in a position that they don't get rain because they won't pay somebody to bring it, and that's crazy to me. So we've taken on some good gun legislation. I think we have, unfortunately, our many of our Republicans in Tennessee don't act like the Tennessee Republican guiding principles document would ascribe us, that we believe that our rights come from God and not from man. I believe that. And so I think when governors and the Nashville establishment infringe upon our right to keep and bear arms, it's a not only a grievous crime, but it's a sin, because it becomes a human being usurping the authority that God has given us. Man has a right to the first law of nature to defend himself, and so we've taken that on some. We've probably, according to Gun Owners of America, we've got some of the best law in the nation now to protect manufacturers of firearms and firearms parts. And we did that, I think, my first year. We introduced that to Tennessee. And then last year, working with Gun Owners of America and Tennessee Firearms Association, we passed what I'm told is the best in the country. Happy to have done that. We've passed a few things you don't want to have to lead the country on, to be honest with you, brother. But sometimes you have to. It's an unfortunate thing that 9 people in robes in D.C. think that they can redefine God's definition of what marriage is. Unfortunately, that happened in 2015 with Oberrefeld. Most of our federal politicians have been weak and feckless on that and haven't attempted to challenge that and go back to what our founders would have thought and what the Constitution says and what God's word says. And but we took some of that on in Tennessee. It's now in Tennessee, you can't be forced to solemnize a marriage. So a pastor, a mayor, a judge can't be forced to perform a same-sex marriage or marry a person to an animal or a tree limb or anything else. It's some of these crazy crazy places across the country, some of the things they do, but we got that passed. I think that was good. We've taken on some veterans issues, and I promise you I'll stop and breathe in just a minute. We've been pretty successful in 3 years, I think, and I'm thankful to God for that. We've taken on some controversial things. We passed a resolution just this past year asking Congress and the Veterans Administration to care for those service members and veterans that were harmed by were in many cases unlawful orders to force a COVID-19 jab or an anthrax vaccination. And so we got that passed. Unfortunately, my Tennessee delegation's done nothing yet on that. Shame on them all. And we also asked in that same resolution to conduct basically an investigation for how the command made those decisions and how we don't allow that to happen again. There's much in the news today about rejecting an unlawful order, and soldiers are trained to do that. I think perhaps some of these leftist Marxist Democrats today are trying to manipulate words, which they often do. But we had men primarily at that time, but men and women in the 60s and early 70s exposed to Agent Orange. And we had people in Washington, D.C. that knew that we were going to kill those people over a long period of time with that exposure, and they continued to do it. That's an immoral thing to do. It is likewise immoral to force a vaccination, a jab, whatever you want to call it, on a service member. And if that service member had a moral objection or a religious objection to it or whatever, to threaten or to, in some cases, kick them out of the service with 19 years and 7 months service is a horrible thing. And so we still need to make that right in America, and we're trying to push on that. I think, I was a soldier, and soldiers go when they're called. I mean, that's part of it. If the nation calls, you go. Good soldiers. But it is the responsibility, I believe, of the politician to take care of the soldier, to make sure that the soldier is fed and clothed and armed properly and trained properly and taken care of. And when they're injured or hurt, it is to provide them, you know, as even as far back as then General Washington, we should take care of our soldiers and our veterans. And so we've got some work to do on that. We have last thing, I promise you I'll breathe with this. I've got a whole list of bills, but I'll stop for now. Some of the things I'm most proud of is I voted against the budget this past year. And as a Republican, voting against a Republican governor's budget proposal is not a comfortable place to be, but we have allowed ourselves to start behaving like DC and Nashville. We've got to stop that. Our budget has gone in 6 years in the state of Tennessee from 37 budget requests from the governor's office, from $37.5 billion to $59.5 billion. In my math skills, that's a 59% increase over 6 years period of time.
That's huge.
It's crazy huge. And if you look, Alexander, I think you'll see that over that same 6 year period, you know, our federal deficit, our federal debt is awful. It's $38 trillion right now and spinning out of control. And we have our U.S. Senator, one of them, Senator Blackburn, would not vote to cap either the budget debt, rather the debt or the deficit. I understand she's introduced legislation now to expand Medicaid, Medicare across the country, some version of that. It's not government's responsibility to care for every soul in their health care and their feeding and their housing. And so these pseudo-Marxist bills that these people pass and they offer indicate that they're willing to spend your money with no controls on it. And so that $38 trillion debt that we have today, when I did the math, I looked at the same 6 year period. Our national debt went up by 52% over that 6 year period. Tennessee's budget, which we have a quote unquote balanced budget. Now we use federal dollars to balance that. So lots of people will question whether we really have a balanced budget, but our budget has gone 59% in growth. Unacceptable. We are not behaving like small government controlled budget Republicans. And one of the things I intend to do, my highest priority as governor is to get that budget under control. I'm borrowing a phrase from somebody, brother, that, and I don't remember who to attribute it to, but taxation, overtaxation, is the first and most effective form of bondage. Our fathers understood that. We've lost sight of that today. We've become a handout society. We stick our hand out and we expect government to fix all of our problems. I would go back to what President Reagan said: is government's not the solution. Government is the problem. And we've allowed it to grow too much nationally. These career DC politicians, they go off to DC for 6 or 8 years or 20 years, and then they'll spend millions of dollars in flyers coming out to every mailbox to convince everybody, I'm not a politician. Well, I don't know who they're trying to convince, me or you or themselves, but they're spending lots of money in trying to do that. And, you know, unfortunately, they're behaving like DC politicians. And then for some of those people to want to come back to Tennessee and be the governor, I'm greatly concerned that we're going to find ourselves in a continued unlimited growth in Nashville that Bill Lee's been responsible for, an infringement on our rights environment that Bill Lee's been responsible for, a growth of government and government control, the adoption of soft socialism to Marxist policies that Bill Lee has been responsible for, the whole school voucher thing. What we did there, I think, directly contradicts Article 11, Section 12 of the Tennessee Constitution, but it's fiscally irresponsible. $1 billion, by some estimates, will be spent in 4 to 5 years to provide these scholarships to 20,000 kids. And they want to expand it this year. I think some of these politicians in Nashville and DC honestly think money grows on trees. And it doesn't on the trees at the Fritts house. It doesn't in Roane County. I don't think it does anywhere in Tennessee. And I think we need to get that under control. So offering budget amendments this past year to try to reduce the budget in Tennessee. I'm proud to have gotten to do that. I was unsuccessful in any of them. We have grown so accustomed to spending other people's money that it's going to require a strong yank on the reins to get this horse slowed down. And I intend to do that as governor.
So you mentioned the government has increased its budget by 59%. So how has Tennessee state government debt increased?
So you don't see an official debt. You see some bonding and things like that, but we're fortunate in Tennessee that we're required to have a balanced budget, meaning that we have an intake of dollars sufficient to support the dollars that we're going to spend, and that's a great thing. That's much better than having a national debt, because again, these DC politicians, and it seems like everybody we send there, with almost without exception, after a couple of years, they're no longer a fiscal conservative. They offer bills that will spend hundreds of billions of your dollars, and your generation and generations of young people, we're putting them at such a debt that you're in bondage to it. And our currency is at risk as a result of their feckless behaviors. Again, I just saw something today that Senator Blackburn is offering additional Medicaid legislation. I don't know what money tree she plans to pull that money from. The people that will vote for that, because they are caught up in this whole entitlement thing, I don't know where they think that money's coming from. When I talk to like Turning Point young people and young Republicans or college Republicans or Young Americans for Liberty, active young people, they talk to me about things. I'm trying to do the right things, they'll say, Monty, and I'm getting an education, but I'm having a hard time getting a job because we're continuing to bring foreigners into our country.
Yeah.
I'm having to compete with them and what they'll work for versus what it's going to take for me. I can't afford to buy a house. And so first and foremost, I think we have to look at a fraudulent election in 2020 where illegitimate Joe Biden almost destroyed America, he and his cronies. And the inflation that we suffered from then will carry with us for decades upon decades. But if we continue to make big spending mistakes like adding new government programs that we can't afford, we're going to continue to borrow money from China and other entities around the world, and we're going to put you in a bad spot. I had young people interview me at something I was at in Hawkins County the other night. It was two young ladies from Volunteer High School that were doing the interview. They said, what would you offer to our generation and Gen Z people? And this is my common answer. I'd have to say, I'm sorry. 2 words, I'm sorry. Because my generation of politics, I've been in politics for 3 years now, 4 years. But my generation of politicians have sold your generation down the river fiscally. And from a liberty perspective, I'm a liberty and less government person. So less government means less money for government. That's the way you control it.
Yeah.
And liberty means that I respect the fact that God endowed you with rights, and that the only way that you lose those rights in the civil economy is by a jury of your peers. And so what we've done with the debt, we've put young police officers and deputies and troopers and firefighters and teachers and concrete finishers and electricians and boilermakers, we've put them in a horrible place. Rent is crazy. We brought in 21 million people, according to Trump's estimates, if they're right. And so now we're putting rooftops over that additional 21 million people in 4 years' time. And so it has driven the cost of real estate up so that rent and insurance has been affected by that. And so it's left your generation in a really hard spot. We ran 3 bills. I ran 3 bills on illegal aliens, all created in God's image. These people, brown eyes, blue eyes, green eyes, doesn't matter, created in God's image. But if you're an adult, you come across that border illegally in the United States, you're a criminal. And so we offered a couple pieces of legislation. House Bill 2190, we went to Article 3, Section 5 of the Tennessee Constitution, which allows the governor, if the General Assembly declares by law, to send the militia, the National Guard, to put down rebellions and invasions. And if you'll recall, 3.5 years ago, 2 years ago, Joe Biden, when the governor of Texas would try to put up razor wire to slow down the invasion, and it was an invasion. 21 million people in 4 years is an invasion. I've been to the Texas border. I've seen what was taking place. I didn't get this all from Fox News. I went and saw for myself. But when the Texas government would try to slow that invasion down, the federal government would come in and cut the razor wire or move the barriers or do something. And so we passed a bill that would authorize our governor, Governor Lee, to send up to a brigade-sized force to help the Texans. We've helped the Texans, 100 plus years ago with the same, almost 200 years ago, with the same kind of thing. And unfortunately, our governor chose not to send anybody to help Texas. He sent lots of folks under Title 10 orders with the federal government, but didn't take advantage of being able to send 2,000 Tennessee Guardsmen down there. And that was sent quite a message. And it was intended to send a message that to illegitimate Joe Biden that Tennessee's not going to play this stupid game. It was intended to send a message to the foreign invader that don't come to Tennessee. We're going to deal with you differently. And that's important. We ran a piece of legislation, House Bill 1872, a couple of years ago, that if you are illegally in these United States and you commit any violent crime in Tennessee, you can have your sentence enhanced to life without parole. If you commit a crime where you display any weapon, not just a firearm, these anti-gun Democrats and Republicans always write firearm into the legislation, but any deadly weapon, whether that's a ball bat in a butcher shop or a butcher knife on a ball field, both could become deadly weapons. That life in prison with no parole. And that for bond issue purpose, once you're arrested, that the magistrate could indeed consider your residency status and whether or not to issue bond. And those are big things. I hope they're being enforced. People ask me, they say, Monty, I want to deport them. I don't want to pay to keep them in a Tennessee state penitentiary. I don't either. I just don't want them to come here and do their dirty deeds. And so sometimes you have to offer consequences severe enough that you discourage the bad behavior. That's really what law and punishment is all about, I think. I think we miss that sometimes. We offered a bill just last year. I don't think it's your taxpayer responsibility to pay for the education of foreign children. We offered a bill that would have not deprived any foreign child the ability to go to school if the way the bill was written, and failed in the Senate, that if you take your child to school, whomever takes your child to a public school, take a birth certificate, take some form of documentation that child is legal here to go to school. And everything's fine. If you can't bring that documentation, you have to pay the TISA amount, which is basically $10,000 before that child starts school. Well, I think that would solve several problems. There'd be lots of people who are illegally in the United States that would choose to go to another state. And again, created in God's image people, but it is not the taxpayer's responsibility to educate their children for free, nor is it your responsibility to provide them a rooftop, food, health care in any of those cases. And some coming from state monies, much of that coming from your federal dollars. But it's not the responsibility. I think we've entered a place in our society where we think government has a role of charity. Government has no role in charity because they forcibly extract those dollars from our pocket. The church has a responsibility for charity. And there's also a big difference between the sojourner and the invader. Those poor people that are indeed fleeing from something, the church is commanded to show kindness, right? And I'm all for that. But we've allowed the church's role to be taken by the government. It's not working out well. We need to correct that.
Yeah, definitely. I was talking to my friend Patrick, and he's in Missouri, and what he said, I don't know about this, but basically you can deport illegal aliens into other states, but you can't deport them outside of the United States. That's the federal government's job. if you became governor, would you be deporting illegal aliens out of the country?
So I don't think there's anything in Tennessee law at all that allows deportation, period. I think that that the the border and deportation of illegals is solely a federal job, and we need to do more of that. As a matter of fact, I would offer that I think we ought to shut all immigration, H-1B, everything down. We have hit a super saturation point in our culture that assimilation cannot occur. We are being colonized today by groups of people from around the world because we have had a reckless, I think intentionally reckless immigration policy. I think we need to stop it all. The colonies of Islamists in Minnesota is an absolute example of something we should not do and we must correct, or the republic is going to suffer. And so you heard lots of these governors that were putting illegals on buses and sending them to blue cities. Well, that takes your money to send them there, and nothing prevents them from coming back in because we don't have troopers on 40 and 75 and 65 and 24 preventing people from coming into the state, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's an exercise in futility for those people who did that. I think that the answer is make the consequences on being here illegally significant, and make the consequences on those people who knowingly provide housing or jobs to illegals. There must be a consequence. If you own a company and you decide you're going to hire 100 illegals or 10 illegals because you can work them for next to nothing, and you can't work someone who grew up in Paris, Tennessee, or Portsmouth, Tennessee, or wherever at that kind of wage, that employer is practicing a soft form of human trafficking. And we ought to treat them like that because they're taking advantage. First, that person's here illegally, but they're taking advantage of the status of that person just for their own greedy paws. And we should not allow that in Tennessee. Maybe it's jail time for the people who knowingly do that, but it's definitely loss of business licensure. We've got to course correct that. We can't allow that to happen.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think that's a smart way because, like you say, it is an invasion. It's definitely changing these states forever, and a lot of these people can't even speak English. So I think it's a big detriment to Tennessee if they're let in.
Well, think about this, brother. Think we are now testing. I think, as I recall, we're driver's license testing in like 5 languages. Just last week or week before last, the Tennessee Department of Health put out bulletins celebrating Islam Cooperation Week. This is a Christian-founded nation. I don't want to be mean to anybody who grew up a Muslim. I do not. I want to see them all be saved. I don't want to see them go to hell. Without Jesus, everybody goes to hell. And so I don't want to see that, but I also don't want my tax dollars publishing documents or websites in Arabic or Espanol or Chinese or any other language. I don't want my Department of Safety testing in anything other than English. There was a bill a couple of years ago that one of my colleagues tried to run to correct that, and Governor Lee's Department of Safety fought it. And many times you'll hear part of the argument will be, well, we might lose federal dollars. Well, you know what? Our governor needs to have the guts to stand up to the federal government, and whether it's a nullification process or a just no, we're not going to do that stupid stuff in Tennessee. We're not going to test people in other languages. They have to be able to read English street signs. They ought to have to test in English if they're going to get a license here. And but again, our Tennessee Department of Health and other Tennessee departments publish things routinely in print and electronically in other languages.
Yeah.
That won't happen under Fritz. We'll stop that. We'll yank a knot in that. There is a cost. It is a de minimis cost. Because I've asked that question from some of the departments as a state representative. What does it cost to print a document that is in English and then also in some other language? And these are small numbers, but those are small numbers that in our balanced budget, that if we're going to spend them, we have to pull them out of your pocket to have them to spend them. And, I don't know how we've gotten here. Are you a Christian?
Yes.
Yes, well, I'm too. And so I think Romans chapter 1 is a really good, it should be a bell tolling to awaken us, because I think we have practiced so many decades of a polytheistic worldview, allowing other gods to come in, that when you read through Romans 1, you see that there's a consequence to that. And at some point in time, that idolatry leads to God giving the people over to reprobate minds. We are there today. We have roosters that identify as hens in today's society.
It's true.
That is a reprobate mind thing. It is a reprobate mind thing for any person, a doctor or any lady or any man that allows it, to think that abortion is a form of health care.
Yeah.
To think that murdering children in their mother's belly, either by a scalpel or by a pill, that's an altar of Molech thing that we practiced for decades, killed 65 million in these butcherous clinics across the United States. That blood flowing in our streets has a consequence. And I'm not sure that we're not under that, at least the judgment of being given over to reprobate minds. And so when I see some of my colleagues voting to continue to expand our budget when we're broke in the country, I think, what is wrong with you? How do you think we can continue to do this? And what are we doing to the next generation? I'm 62. I will be soon. It is my responsibility as a Christian, as an American, as a Tennessean, to try to hand off to your generation something where you can prosper, you can exercise liberty, and that you can take what God has blessed you with and make a living, provide for your wife and for your children. That is my responsibility. And I think many of these people have forgotten it, brother.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think they're doing some pretty scandalous things with abortion. I definitely agree with you with what you said. I think it's an offering to something very evil, and I think it's a very evil thing when you kill the most innocent being that you can, an unborn child. So it's definitely pretty sick.
And the
So
greatest blessing all through scripture, the great blessing that God blessed men and women with was children. And we have turned that. We, again, I use the comical approach. We can't determine a hen from a rooster, but we've lost our collective minds in many cases. You just look, we had an election yesterday in Middle Tennessee, right? Tennessee 7.
yeah,
And glad to see that the Republican won, that Matt won that, right? It should never be that close. It should never be. And I think it's a result of a couple things. I think we have allowed society leadership, church leadership, and civil government leadership has allowed us to adopt the wrong standards and an idolatrous posture. And so many people find it okay to vote for someone who's a rabid abortionist like Miss Bain is. And that would have never happened in the early years of my generation.
yeah.
But now, was it what, 6 or 8 point difference? My goodness, it should never be that close. The second thing I think we better learn from that, and my colleagues will all get mad at me for saying this, but that's okay. They don't need to be so thin-skinned. Start acting like Republicans. Go back and look at that Tennessee Republican Party guiding principles document. Recognize that our rights come from God. That includes the right to keep and bear arms, to dissent with the government, to not always agree on things. We don't have to hate one another to disagree, but we do have to speak the truth. And we've got to get back to that. We've hit this gray area. Our Tennessee Republican Party guiding principles asserts that life begins at conception. Yet the federal platform, again, reports have it that Senator Blackburn chaired this, that we changed life to only start somewhere in the 3rd trimester of pregnancy. I think in God's economy, that means judgment. I don't want you and my grandchildren and me to suffer collectively under God's wrath because we did stupid things with the national platform. I say let's go back to what it means to be an American, to be a Christian nation. I will certainly never be perfect. I need the blood of Christ to get my, any righteousness I have comes from Almighty God through that cross and that empty tomb. But we better start looking to where our blessings actually come from and stop thinking of our politicians and public servants as the dispensers of our rights, because that is also a form of idolatry that we're practicing right now in the United States.
I definitely agree with you. The power is in the hands of God and the people to do God's will. So I think that's definitely important. We shouldn't be worshiping politicians. Even if they're doing great things, we shouldn't worship them. They're just doing their job. So moving on to a different thing. So I'm really a proponent of private property rights, so I have a few questions on that. So what is your view on conservation easements? Are they useful tool for farmers or a threat to property rights?
I think two things. I think what we just passed this past year was unconstitutional, and the founders of this nation were rolling over in their grave that we would allow the Tennessee government to dangle a small carrot in front of a farmer and you would give up your right to make your own decisions. I voted against that. It had a $25 million tag, so it meant that you are now paying for some bureaucrat in Nashville to say, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, you get a conservation easement. And it is soft socialism. Again, it's heading down that slippery slope of socialism. I think it is selling our birthright, because I think private property ownership rights are a big thing. And I think right now, if you own 100 acres on the Cumberland Plateau and you say, I want to give an easement to Monty Fritts to be able to go and hunt on my property and fish my ponds, and so I'm going to give him a roadway easement. You can do that right now. You could give me that easement. There's a legal instrument to do that. And the taxpayer doesn't have to fund it. Yeah. As a matter of fact, if you wanted to say that 100 acres was only going to be for forestry or for agriculture, you could do that today. But what we scammed people with was we're gonna stop the loss of farmland in Tennessee by offering a few dollars out to people to buy their birthright. And we're buying their birthrights for a bowl of porridge. It's crazy. And in that same budget, brother, we had a $60 million budget line item. I voted against the budget last year. I spoke against these things. In that same budget, we had $60 million that was going to be 0% construction, new home construction loans for first-time home builders. It is not the role of government to provide you a 0% interest loan. And when you think about that farmland that in many cases, most cases, is being sold by family members so people can build houses on it, right? You own the property, you get to do with it what you want to, right? That shouldn't give you the right to pollute your neighbor's farmland next to you, right? I mean, there's some responsibility with that, but it's a liberty thing. It's that 2 Corinthians 3:17, where the Spirit of the Lord is, there's liberty. You get to choose every day and every decision whether to do the right thing and bear the reward or do the wrong thing and suffer consequences. But we had $60 million in to provide that. And so you've got those dollars wrestling against one another, because we increased the market demand for new home construction because more people will become qualified because of that 0%, right? There'll be some number of people that weren't able to buy that would be able to build and then subsequently buy their home because of that. And that's the intent of the bill. But the $25 million is being spent to protect that farmland. So who's winning? I don't know if they don't have any meetings where they collectively decide what makes sense or not up at Capitol Hill, but that just did not make sense to me. So short answer is you've already got the right. If you want to put an easement on the farm, on do it, but you shouldn't do that at my cost, number one. And I would question, brother, if you give the state of, if you decided today of your own self to give your property into a conservation easement, if you don't affect anybody else, okay, that's you doing it. But why would you ever give the government or an NGO, in many cases, that doesn't even abide and reside in the state of Tennessee, the ability to do that? I asked a question of the governor's office when this come before Ag Committee. I asked a couple of questions. I said, so tell me, if we had a pie chart of $25 million, this farmland conservation easement thing, right? He had some of the wealthy people and some of my politician friends. They do whatever the governor tells them to, I guess, so they can have dinner with him or something. There's a lust for celebrity in it. But some of them are wealthy people, and they've got money to throw around, and they can do conservation easements. Okay, they've earned it. That's theirs to do. Stay out of everybody else's business, and don't use these seductive, socialistic things to pull Tennessee property owners' rights into the state of Tennessee. So I asked the question, out of that $25 million pie chart, how much goes to the farmer? How much is going to go to the lawyer who does the instrument? And how much is going to go to the NGO to manage it in perpetuity? And the answer they gave me, you can go, don't trust me, go watch this. Well, we don't know that, Representative Fritz. I'm thinking, well, wouldn't you want to figure that out before we offer to have the taxpayers of Tennessee pay for it? I think that some of this stuff fits into that UN 2030 or what used to be 2025 agenda. I think that a governor who meets with the World Economic Forum and smiles like he's eating cornbread when he's meeting with them tells you all you need to know, that these people are not concerned about your rights. They're not concerned about the Constitution and your creator endowed rights. They're concerned about pleasing the celebrity elite and some group of folks that have no concern about our republic.
I definitely agree with you, and my personal opinion on these conservation easements is it's pretty amazing how they sell people down the river for easement in perpetuity. You can't do anything with that land. It basically makes the land worthless. You can't farm on it. You can't build a house on it. So I definitely like when I was talking to Bud Hulsey, he's a Tennessee state representative. He was saying that he put a bill in to basically make it so these easements would only last 15 years and then you could get it renewed. So I think it's great that you're against them because it's definitely a big attack on property rights in my opinion. So that leads me to my next question. So we're going to be asking you some questions on what you want to do as governor if elected. So my first question would be uh, one thing I'm really tired of seeing is people with low income, elderly people on fixed income, or just people with low income are getting kicked out of their houses basically for not paying property taxes. So I was just wondering if you might be willing, as governor, to work towards getting rid of property taxes on people's primary residence. Like I get property taxes for a corporation that owns like 100 houses or, people getting money from rent. But it seems to me like private people who own their own home shouldn't have their home taken away from them if they can't pay property taxes. So I want to get your thoughts on that.
So we're taking an approach at that. This is my last year as a state rep. I'm told, the rumor has it, none of them have the guts enough to say it to my face, but because I don't just do what they tell me to do, and again, I've got a long list of stuff we've been successful in passing. So it's not that I've ran out of good ideas. It's that I won't capitulate to a group of bullies in Nashville. The word has it, they're not going to let me pass any bills this year, right? Whoever they is, cowards. But the Constitution, Tennessee Constitution right now allows local governments to raise revenue by property tax. And so I think to abolish property tax, one would have to amend the Constitution. And that's a 4-year process. I don't know that I'm fully for that or opposed to that. I think some of that would be, all right, how do we probably don't need to spend as much money, because my number one objective is the next governors get the budget under control, state budget. I think that if you look at the debt in many of our counties, we have spending problems in our counties too.
Yeah.
And, we better get control of that because that's a problem. But I don't know that I'm, which way I stand on that. It depends on how we'd replace the revenue and how we thought we'd spend the money. I've learned to not trust many of these contemporary politicians. The Mitch McConnells and Nancy Pelosi's, and we have both in the Tennessee General Assembly. We have senators that have been there for 20 and 40 years, and we have state reps that have been there that long, and collectively they hadn't had an original idea in 20 years.
Yeah.
And so I don't trust them to make some of those changes. So it concerns me about changing the Constitution, right? A little bit. But what I am doing this year does two things. I've got a bill that should be ready to file soon that would fix the appraisal of your real estate at the 2020 value or what you have paid for it since. What I'm trying to do is get this shell game of the net neutral, next year net neutral thing out of the way and stop the appraisals. Because if you bought your home 10 years ago and you paid $200,000 for it, likely in many parts of Tennessee, it's worth at least twice that now. And so I think that means you're paying taxes against an unrealized capital gains. And most of us Republicans will tell you that I don't want to pay taxes on any of my capital gains. But I think, because I hate taxes, but I think that we certainly don't want to pay taxes on unrealized capital gains. We don't want to start down that, because if that ever opens, all of your savings plans in your bank accounts, you'll be doing calculations each year to what you gained, and you'll be paying taxes on them because these politicians think they spend your money better than you do. So the first part fixes it at 2020, kind of takes the appraisal process out of it. Second part of that bill does this, that you can't be evicted or displaced from your property by the government for tax delinquency. So Denise and I, if we were to meet our common demise, my wife and I, and all the real estate that we own, if we both died before our sons could realize their inheritance, if they have any, all the debts would have to be settled in my estate, right? That's current Tennessee law. And I'm not attempting to change that part of it. I just don't want to see that person evicted from their property if they're a U.S. citizen. And we've written it that way. It's been problematic for some of the folks in Nashville. They said, you can't do that. I said, well, I don't care if I don't think foreigners ought to own property in Tennessee. So I don't want to protect them. But those that are citizens, if you find yourself having to make a decision between your medication and your property taxes, which I think many older Tennesseans do, I think to kick that person out of their home and sell it on the courthouse steps is a great evil. And I'm trying to stop that.
I definitely think that's a step in the right direction. I think that's a good idea you have there. So just getting back to your run for governor, what are some other major things that you want to do as governor if elected?
First, again, back to no extra constitutional spending. We should not be spending anything outside the bound that we are given in the Constitution. And so lots of these little feel-good programs that Lee and Haslam and others have set up, we need to stop doing that and get the budget under control. We need to leave more money in your pocket and in your counties rather than send it to Nashville. Inflation has not only occurred or created by the federal government printing money, but when you send your dollar to Nashville, even if it comes back to you in form of a grant or a service, you never get a dollar back, and they don't earn any interest. So if you send a dollar to Nashville from your county, what county are you in?
Carroll County.
All right, good. I was in Carroll County, not just recently. We had a big turnout there in Yuma, Tennessee.
Yeah.
But if you send a dollar to Nashville, Tennessee, you will never get more than 99 cents back. And that becomes an inflationary impact on the economy in Tennessee and how the velocity of those dollars migrate through the Tennessee economy. There is some travel time and duration at each stop that is most healthy in the velocity of money traveling through an economy. And it's always healthier if you are sending that dollar through the economy than it is the government sending it through, always. Because you have the handling fee, or what I would call laundering fee, that occurs in Nashville and DC. We need to slow that down. Property tax is something that if we're not successful this year, it's something I'm going to push for as governor. Grocery sales tax, 4% grocery sales tax. I've tried once already. I'll try again this year as a representative to start removing that 4% on grocery sales. And I think I have a good measured way to do that won't break the bank, leave more money in average Tennesseans' pockets, every Tennessean's pocket. But it's the one on the lower socioeconomic platforms that those 4 cents mean the most to. I don't feel it. But there's some old person or some starting out family that they could use that 4 cents. And especially when we're now using money that is derived from that state grocery sales tax in corporate welfare, which I intend to end. It is extra constitutional. We should not be budgeting to build the Titans' new stadiums, nor the Smokies in Knoxville, or whatever, the Mud Pups, or whatever they are in Chattanooga, whatever the team is in Jackson and Memphis. We shouldn't be funding those stadiums. We shouldn't be funding Ford Motor Company. I drive an F-250 a lot, but we shouldn't be funding Ford Motor Company through your tax dollars. I think liberty and less government are the greatest draws for people and prosperity in Tennessee. And we better embrace liberty and less government. So that's my attempt. Recalibrate Nashville, Tennessee, so that they realize they work for you and under the authority of the Constitution. They have forgotten that, Nashville, right now. The whole Hughes v. Lee lawsuit, are you familiar with it?
No, please tell me more about that.
So a year and a half or so ago, there's a group of West Tennesseans, and I think it started in Gibson County. They brought suit against Governor Lee, Attorney General Skermetti, and Jeff Long about the language in Tennessee law that says intent to go armed. And intent to go armed, those words make it criminal for me to have a pistol on my hip or a rifle over my shoulder. And I have committed a crime in Tennessee. I have to have an exception or a defense against that criminality. Most of us Americans believe that we're innocent until proven guilty, right? Jury of our peers, right? Kind of thing. But Tennessee gun law is backwards from that. So that if you have a revolver on your hip, you have committed a crime, and your defense against that crime can either be open carry law, which was passed. We do not have constitutional carry in Tennessee. I say that again. So all my colleagues, who some of them mistakenly or dishonestly get up and say we have constitutional carry in Tennessee, they're either ignorant or liars. We do not have that. And so if you have that pistol on your hip, you can either defend that against the open carry law, or you can have a permit for concealed carry. But otherwise, you've committed a crime. So that's upside down constitutionally, I think. So these people brought suit, the Hughes and Gun Owners America and several other groups. And the court, Chancery Court, Western District, State of Tennessee, said, you're right, this is unconstitutional. We should celebrate that, brother.
Yeah.
That means that liberty has won. And it's even bigger than that. That's a 154-year-old code. So that means it was Jim Crow Reconstruction era code that likely was put into law to prevent a black man from being able to arm himself. And so I think we ought to celebrate every time we remove Jim Crow law. Well, the governor and the Nashville establishment don't feel that way. So they appealed that verdict, that ruling of the Chancery Court. In essence, they want to continue to infringe upon your rights to keep and bear arms, and they want to extend Jim Crow law in the state of Tennessee. That's happening right now. And guess how they pay for that lawsuit? Your tax dollars.
Yeah.
So here's what I would offer you. And this is kind of a macro view of that. I think gun rights and Second Amendment, Article 1, Section 26 type things in the Tennessee Constitution are the greatest leading indicator or litmus test for how a politician or a public servant, two different species of beings, but how they view your rights. If that person will say, I think I should be able to limit your magazine capacity to 10, they also don't think your rights come from God. They think they get to dispense your rights.
Right.
If that person says to you, you shouldn't be able to have an assault weapon, whatever that is, they don't think your rights come from God. They've departed from that, and they have assumed this position of deity that they get to decide. Well, we did that with the Hughes v. Lee. Shame on them. Shame on the Nashville establishment. I sent out a letter pleading with them, don't do this. Don't appeal this. You're never going to get the stink out of your clothes for what you're doing. Basically, now the letter didn't say that, but that's the essence of it. And I could only get like a dozen people to join me in that letter. in the
That
district.
dozen a dozen assemblymen.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And lots, I sent it to about 25 people who were staunch Second Amendment supporters. And they're, I'll just tell you, brother, they're weak men. They're too caught up in the political celebrity. They think your rights come second to them maintaining a good uh, party relationship with the rest of the politicians.
Wow. So were these 12 state assemblymen?
State reps.
Wow. So 12 out, it was only 12 out of 99 people were willing to sign that letter with you.
Well, the Democrats would never sign it. They're all stuck on stupid when it comes to gun rights, anyways. And I didn't send it to all 75 Republicans because I knew some of them. I know they hate your gun rights. There was no sense in me sending it to them.
Yeah.
I sent it to, I think it was 25 that I thought were the strongest. And 11 of them come back and signed the letter with me. One of them got the reply back a little bit late. Might have been my fault, I think he's part of the 12. And then we had two other young men write their own letters, which is fine. But yeah, isn't that pathetic? That
It is pretty pathetic.
it is. And you would think they would be in support of this. So here's part of the narrative that they've given. And it's counter to Article 2, Section 1 and 2 of the Tennessee Constitution. Article 2, Section 1 and 2 of the Constitution talk about the powers for the legislative, judiciary, and executive departments, right? And they don't cross over. I can't do the executive job. He can't do my job. We can't do the judge's job, except where it's specifically called out in the Constitution. That's the way it reads, basically. And so some of them have bought into the narrative. Well, we need the court to look at this to tell us how to rewrite the law. Courts don't write law. Legislators write law. Courts get a crack at it if whether it's constitutional or not. So does the executive department or branch, right? The governor shouldn't enforce unconstitutional law. If I pass a bill and get it to his desk and he thinks it's unconstitutional, he should veto it and say so. If the last governor signed a law into place and the next governor comes in and says, I think it's unconstitutional to have Ghostbuster signs with guns on them on all state buildings and state properties, suggesting you can't arm and defend yourself on state property. If I think that's unconstitutional, I think I can say I'm not going to enforce that. And by executive order, send it out to all the state departments. Take those stupid signs down. I intend to do that.
Yeah, I think that's definitely smart. So I'd like to take the time to share my screen. 1 second. So this is representing Monty Fritts. He represents District 32, and you can go to Monty Fritts for Governor Fritz for Tennessee.com, and then that way you can read everything that he has about his run for governor. And he was a U.S. veteran, like he said. You can donate to his campaign here, and you can support the campaign. And you have an email mailing list too, as well, right, Monty?
We are working on one right now. We're working on a much bigger one right now, but we do have email mailing lists that are coming out right now. If people want to be a part of that, I answer lots of emails now. I put in lots of hours in doing this whole run for governor. I would just close with these thoughts. I generally don't like being around career politicians, Alexander. I don't have any desire to be around these folks, but I have a desire for your liberty. And I think God, Almighty God, is calling me to run. That doesn't mean he's going to miracle me into the office. I've got to work, and people got to practice their liberty to vote. But I'm going to follow my call to run, and we're going to speak candidly about matters that I think that are important to Tennesseans. And I really think I'll be the next governor of the state of Tennessee. And I look forward to getting our azimuth. If you've done any navigation with a compass, we need to shoot a new azimuth in Tennessee toward liberty and less government.
I definitely agree with you, and I think it's great what you're doing and running for governor. You definitely seem to be the most conservative out of everyone who's running for governor. So I think that's a big plus for people in Tennessee. And I definitely think it's a good idea to vote for Monty. He's done great things in the state assembly. He's shown to be a fiscal conservative, and he cares deeply about private property rights and your rights. And I think that's really good. Uh, is there anything else, Monty, that you'd like to say in this video?
Well, yes, thank you. I would encourage folks to go look at the freedomindex.org. It's a publication from the John Birch Society. I am a John Birch Society member. I hate communism, and we're practicing some of that. The lead up to it in Tennessee and in America, we got to stop that. It's about the Constitution. It's about what God has blessed us with. So that the JBS through the freedomindex.org, all one word, the freedomindex.org, you can go look up the scores of what are basically how well you've performed within your constitutional duty in your votes as a U.S. senator, as a U.S. congressman, as a state representative from Tennessee, and have you abided by small government principles? I've got a pretty good score for the last few years, and I think my average is 94. I had 100 last year, and the unfortunate thing is when you look at much of in the General Assembly, in the House in Tennessee, many of the leadership scored between 50 and 67 on that assessment, that same assessment. I scored 100 on. They scored between 50 and 67. I'm not picking on them. I'm just calling them to repentance. They took an oath to uphold the Constitution. And one of the most reliable assessors of constitutional performance is the John Birch Society. I don't guess anybody's perfect, but they're one of the most reliable and long-standing. I would call those folks to repentance, vote with the Constitution. When you look at the other folks reportedly going to run for governor, Senator Blackburn scored a 68. I think that's her last year's score, and Rose had a 63. Those are unacceptable scores. And I'd call all my Tennessee delegation. I think Burchett has a decent score. He's somewhere in the 80s. I think Congressman Harshbarger has a pretty good score, but the rest of them are in like the 60s and unacceptable.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think it's great that you're serving the state of Tennessee directly. Those politicians are serving the federal government, basically as senator and congressman. So I think that's a big differential out your conservative values and that you're serving in the Tennessee legislature right now. And yeah, I'd just like to thank you, Monty, for coming on the show and giving us all this great insight on your run for governor. Definitely check out his website. And I would just like to thank everyone for watching this video. Please share it with your friends. We need to get it out to as many people as possible before Election Day so you know what's going on. And I just hope you all have a good rest of your day. Thanks again, Monty. And please subscribe and like the video. Thank you all. Goodbye.